Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I'm making for Eli as part of the custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen. This is from an act named Frank Ocean off of their Channel Orange album. This is titled Sweet Life, so we're going to listen through it from start till finish. We're going to hear what we think. Let's go.
The best song wasn't the single, but you weren't either. Living in Ladera Heights, the Black Beverly Hills, domesticated paradise, palm trees and pools. The water's blue, swallow the pill, keeping it surreal. Whatever you like, whatever feels good. Whatever takes your mountain high, keeping it surreal. Not sugar free, my TV ain't HD, that's too real. Grapevine, mango, peaches and lime, sweet.
I'm not really sure if I'm set on how the vocals are recorded. There's a little bit of a kind of a fuzziness to them, like we've sort of pushed the gain too much, like as if that distortion is a deliberate thing. If it is stylistically, then that's cool. I would assume it would be so, considering the kind of tenure that Frank Ocean has. Or alternatively, just they wanted that as sort of an artistic effect. You know, either way, it's fine. The vocal melodies and how they move with the unpredictable chord progressions there, the seventh extensions there, parallel major to major, parallel minor to minor, it's really pretty. The drums are kind of quiet, the bass is kind of boisterous in the front.
Sweet life, sweet life, sweet life, sweet life, a sweet, 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 sweet life.
Does sound really fresh with the keys on the left though, for sure.
Sweet life, sweet pie. You've had a landscaper and a housekeeper since you were born. The sunshine always kept you warm. So why see the world if you got the beach? Don't know why see the world when you got the beach. The sweet life. That song wasn't a single, but you couldn't turn your radio down. Satellite need a receiver, can't seem to turn the signal fully off. Transmitting away, you're catching that breeze till you're dead in the grave, but you're keeping it so real.
I mean, the choirs are nice here. The way it's written and arranged, the way things are mixed and leveled in a way that's not typically conventional. Like, it all comes together in a hook. Everything seems really sort of nice and complete in that hook section, but
whatever you like, whatever feels good, whatever takes your mountain high. And it's real, not sugar free, my TV ain't HD, that's too rare. Grapevines, mango, peaches and lime, a sweet life, a sweet life, a sweet life, yeah.
nice use of repeaters in the background.
A sweet life, a sweet life, live and die in the life. You've had a landscaper and a housekeeper since you were born. Yeah, the sunshine always kept you warm.
It's an unconventional note that they're going down to. It rises back up with the next sort of chord in the loop. It's just, it seems like we're avoiding resolving, I think, to extend the palatable length of it.
I see the world if you got the beach. Don't know why I see the world when you got the beach. And the water is exactly what I wanted. It's everything I thought it'd be. But this neighborhood is getting trippier every day. The neighborhood is going ape shit crazy. Housekeeper since you were born.
Huge sound from the choir too.
The sunshine always kept you warm. So why see the world if you got the beach? Don't know why see the world when you got the beach, the sweet life.
Mini organ on the right, guitar on the left. And the 16th note groove on the hi-hats is pretty fresh as well. Great sense of consistency with that. And for it to just kind of not want to resolve there and kind of go, you know, it's just very tense. It's a very intense situation there. But nonetheless, a very satisfying track to listen to. I quite like this one. And welcome to my review of this track from an act named Frank Ocean, titled Sweet Life. Now, what do I think this track is about? I think it's talking about someone who is clearly quite well off and they've kind of been given everything that they need. Like, they've got people looking after their house and stuff like that ever since they were born. They're well-to-do. Maybe, you know, they're talking about the why see the world when you've got the beach. Talking about the simpler things like fruit and stuff and how it's a sweet life. I think maybe it's talking about it's good to sort of take the small thing, not to take the small things for granted, and to try and sort of like find value in not always reaching for more and more and more and just consuming things. I think that's my sort of take on this track. I know there's probably more nuance to it, but that's what I got on the first listen. I think that, you know, in addition to this, it's his vocals are tight. Really sensational phrasing there, elegant with the head and chest voice. A little bit of falsetto occasionally, really smooth legato passages there. Lots of variation with the way we phrase our vocal rhythms as well, our lines and stanzas. Really enigmatic hook line with the choir coming in as well for extra bit of sort of oomph there to kind of, you know, calibrate and notch it up. And I think that was very effective. And ultimately, it was just consistently tuneful. Made a lot of sense with the backing that we had. Very nice and very easy to listen to, even if some of the melodic passages were a little bit charming. If it's challenging, should I say, if you weren't sort of like familiar with how sort of like jazz theory works, with the not just, you know, resolving to the first or something like that afterwards, kind of having a sense of edginess through relying on some of the other notes of the triads or extensions. I think, like, you know, outside of a sort of a technicality to the vocal melodies and everything like that in regards to like how they sort of notch up against the rest of the instruments, ultimately it's just a really great sort of track there. Clearly Frank Ocean can sing, and I understand why they've got the career that they have. The track at 4 minutes 22 is well fleshed out. I wasn't initially set with how things were leveled at the start. It was a little bit rough around the edges with like the grit on the vocals, as if we were deliberately pushing them to make it sound like a certain kind of aesthetic, with things maybe not leveled the way they were. You know, maybe this can talk about someone, maybe how do I describe it? It's like potentially the way we think things are going wrong all the time and stuff like that, and like things that seem unbalanced and everything like that, and then eventually we get to a point where things are right and where sort of like everything's kind of nice and shiny and neat, and then we just kind of get used to that. We kind of take it for granted. We're more likely to notice when things are a bit rough around the edges than when things are absolutely fine and where they need to be, because of, you know, hedonic adaptation, but also just an assumption that everything should be fine all the time when, you know, arguably there's no reason for it to be. There's just too many variables outside of our own control. The combination of the keys, the piano, the basses, the drums, you know, the guitars and pads there with the brass as well is charming. If I go through a few of the instruments I like, because I didn't have them all come at the same time, in the same way they didn't have Frank with the choir for the entire time there. They came in the hooks later on the track, and they're more sort of prominent towards the second and last third up until things dropped for that sort of instrumental outro part. But I liked the drums. I think the drums were really well played. There was a really great sort of tightness with the tone of the kits of the individual part of the instrument, but also just the use of like the cymbals, the kicks and snares to just form a sense of groove and movement there without overwhelming things too much, whilst also having enough variety with the patterns to make them sort of make sense with the individual sections they are in, you know, to connect with the other elements there, not sort of be too much. but also just to maintain a sense of pace and stability even when there's so much activity, like in those 16th note high groups that we had later on. I thought that it was really sort of stellar how it kept everything together, just without overplaying. I think the bass line as well was charming. Initially I was a little bit prominent for my tastes, but I think that was a stylistic thing. I can tell from the latter half of the track that the studio quality is commercial grade. So I can only assume it's a deliberate decision to have things a little bit uneven in the mix earlier on. But yeah, it was prominent, kind of big and rounded, sort of woolly. And later on, it just sort of faded into the ether and was just, it was tuneful, worked well with the chord progressions we had, even if they weren't sort of like typical to the major or minor scales that we first of all instantiated. It nonetheless found a way to sort of work it in a way that was very tuneful. The keys were nice and bright and charming to listen to. They're very fresh because of the filtering, the way they were done on the left side of the stereo field when I think it first came in. It was almost like we were having like the sunshine on us. From a production perspective, it was symbolic of like imagery that could be evoked from that. And that's kind of the next step of the studio side. It's not just being able to sort of level stuff and sort of like have it technically be exactly where it needs to be. But it's also about then going, okay, what can I do within these stems to make them sound like what the song is saying? How can I make a song through the post? And they managed to do that. They managed to make them, I think, more sort of like tight because of that. There was a greater chemistry across literally all of the elements because of that. I think there was an interesting exploration of parts on the piano and the organs, the electric keys there. It was great to have chord progressions that were a little bit unpredictable. They was kind of more noticeable because they didn't just go into the natural major or minor sort of like holes. If we added an unexpected note, it was like, oh, what's that? In the same way the vocals went down below the root, as I understand it. Didn't want to resolve between halves of the chorus. And it's just those little things which, technically speaking, you might be like, well, okay, it's not completely comfortable on its own, so therefore it's not necessarily okay. But when you have such competent singing going on, when you have a really great performance across a wide variety of instruments involved, you get away with that. You get away with being able to have a little bit of sort of like weirdness or quirkiness with the harmonies there, because it mellows out. I think the guitar parts we had later on were nice and simplistic as well. A nice little bit of intonation in that mid-range there on the left there to kind of go against the organ that we had on the other side, because the organ was usually on the right. And just kind of articulated or reflected a few of the decisions made with the progression at that point. And then, of course, we had the pads as like a sub-layer. We had this tremendous dimensionality to the mix. Part of that was because we had softer and louder parts, but also I think just the pads were like very subtle, kind of like a film score soundtrack. They could have been like synth strings or something like that, or they could have been strings, but either way, there was like a little kind of fuzzy thing going on in the background in that chorus section that just kind of really sort of mellowed it out. When you listened more deeply, you got there, and that's when you've been sucked in. I think the theme overall was kind of friendly. It was not ever meant to be sort of too intense or dramatic. I know the chord progressions were kind of there to catch your attention with maybe like the odd chromaticism or unexpected note, but ultimately it was meant to be very smooth listening that allowed the singing and the vocals to kind of swim around within it. It was meant to sort of be a little bit kind of down to earth and trying to sort of not be too over its head. And I think the minimalism, like the lack of things just trying to fill up the stereo field in that intro part there, the first verse part, is kind of like the soft start and allows, those filtered piano elements, suffix, for example, to have more effect. We had variations within of chord progressions and bass lines and stuff like that, don't get me wrong. So it's not like we had one main idea, but the concept generally, with the sense of sophistication from those harmonies, combined with the real sort of lax, sort of chill nature of the slow tempo, and like the legato vibes, made me kind of think that it was meant to be something you just kind of sat and sort of vibed with in your bedroom or something like that. Kind of just trying to sort of meditate on how lucky you were to have what you have and to not just take it for granted. Like aside from the theme, the studio recording, mixing, and mastering, again, I've given my thoughts on how I felt about the mix earlier with the recording quality and stuff, but I think it changed later on. And I don't want people to think I don't like the music because of that. Like, I can feel a certain way about certain elements of something and not dislike the song. It's more like I look at it from a technical perspective, right? So like if I was doing a review and I went up to the microphone and I made it sort of clip by putting too much signal through it, I wouldn't personally be happy with that. but it can be a stylistic choice for people who want that clipping kind of sound of the gain being too much for the mic channel. That's okay. That's not me. When I talk about stuff like, oh, I think the vocals, I understand it was probably deliberate. I don't know if I necessarily felt any sort of strong feelings from this. I think personally because it was just the fact that nothing really resolved within the track. It didn't sort of seem like there were no major sort of like points where I was like, oh yeah, that sounded nice going into that. There were things that sounded nice because of the filtering of the keys sounding really fresh, for example, by removing a lot of the low frequencies. The tone of the drums later on, once they were sort of like balanced out by a lot of the stuff on the side, sounded great. There's a great texture to the drums as well as to the various instruments in the mix. And again, I like the post-production here. If it is a deliberate thing, making the sort of the mix unbalanced at first and then sort of like sweetening up later on, that's cool. The vocals, how they floated around the side and were very sort of prominent when they needed to be, were dope as well. I think that there was clear sort of finesse shown here from all parties. I think that like things were nice and wide in the stereo field, so the music surrounded you when it wanted you to. Other times there was very little around the stereo field, there were little bits kind of poking around, which was kind of a nice sort of 4D chess kind of game, kind of move for the oral aesthetic. There was sufficient dynamic range, things were not the same loudest all the time, and it was nice now without pumping. And effectively this is my review of this track from an ex named Frank Ocean, titled Sweet Life, this track titled Sweet Life. And hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show him some love via their various social medias and a Spotify page. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SB Patrons video. Spiderhands out.